Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to People Always Ask. This episode is relatively simple. People always ask me what mindfulness is. It's a real big buzzword. You might have heard a bunch of people talking about it, offering choruses on it, trying to get you to come in and do a yoga class because you need to work on it, whatever. But what actually is mindfulness? And besides that, what is it even useful for? Why is everybody pushing this down everybody's throat? Now, it's a new wave in therapy to be talking about mindfulness, but when it comes to the idea of what mindfulness really is, this is an ancient idea that actually has its roots in a lot of Buddhist presence and mindfulness and contemplative practices, right? So if you're a person who engages in any contemplative practice, right, which means something where you're engaging your mind to be present, right, then you're probably pretty familiar with this already. And so we're talking about a principle that's thousands of years old in origin, and then in the 1970s starts to get studied so that they can use it in psychology separate and divorced from the spirituality. But always remember that we want to honor the roots of where things come from. And where this really comes from is from the sort of practices and mindfulness that have to do with enlightenment that are closely aligned with a lot of Buddhist practices around enlightenment and hold for us two ideas. One, that if you're present, your life is more pleasant. The other is that if you are not present and grounded, that suffering is a lot more difficult to get through, right? So if we get to this stage of enlightenment, that we can actually experience more peace, more joy, right? So definition time. In its most raw form, mindfulness is simply engaging in any activity and focusing on the here and now, also known for some people as being present or presence, right? And so it's kind of a simple concept, but a lot of times what ends up happening is people think that you have to basically be silent and still in order to practice mindfulness because they think it means meditation, or they think it means going and doing a visualization that you found on YouTube. But that's actually not what it's about. So if we just break down this definition, let's just go from one side to the other. So first of all, engaging in any activity. The first part of why this is important is because we engage in stuff all the time. Turns out that the second part here is not what we're doing. We're not focusing on the here and now while we're engaging in an activity. So if you want to practice mindfulness, actually all you need to do is pick any activity that you want to engage in while also focusing on the here and now, while also being present. So let me tell you about why it is everybody's pushing this. So the reason that people push mindfulness as a concept is because in the short term, what mindfulness can help you do is calm down, ground yourself, think more clearly, and make choices that are grounded more in sort of your calm, compassionate self than your defensive and sort of fight or flight or just giving up and fawning to people kind of self. We want to be able to make choices from that place, and mindfulness in the moment, if we're able to use mindfulness correctly, will help us stay here and now and make good, grounded choices. If we practice mindfulness, though, over long periods of time, and they say that if this was like a medication that they were going to give you to feel better, mindfulness needs to be practiced at least 20 minutes a day in order to really be effective, right? So one of the things that you want to really think about, right, is that this doesn't have to be a silent, still process, but it should be happening almost every day. And if you can do that in the long, long term, your body's going to automatically do something that's actually a lot more pleasant, which is engaging in the activities that you're engaging in while focusing in the here and now without you having to try. And so that reduces anxiety, that reduces depression, that reduces all sorts of social interaction, stress, and triggers and attachment issues. Because if I can stay present in what's happening here and now, then I'm not going into my thoughts and my fears and the worries about the past and the future. So let's talk about how you might be able to do this. So if you wanted to start thinking about mindfulness, you might be like, oh, I can do meditations, right? And there's a lot of great apps, right, that you can try. I'm not going to promote one over the other. They're all basically doing the same thing, engaging you in something, whether it's a sound or a guided meditation or a breath activity where you focus on the here and now. The reason why a lot of people like to focus on breath, and let's just start with that, is because breath is always here with us. You can take it everywhere that you go. And it sort of treads the line between the conscious and the unconscious. I'm breathing when I don't think about it, and I can also control my breathing. So, in terms of trying to get this activity down of focusing on being present, breath is something that's always keeping us right here, right now, because we have to keep breathing, right? Also, when we change emotional states, our breath is almost always affected. A good breath, a nice, good, calming breath, goes all the way down to your belly. And it feels almost like when you're smelling flowers, the way that you breathe in. Now, it's not a sucking, intense kind of vacuum inhale. What it really is just this subtle breath of noticing, right? And so you can actually use any one of your five senses to ground you. Smell is one of them, right? So let's just give an example for those of you who are like, what are you talking about, right? If you get really angry, if you get really anxious, if you get overwhelmed and you want to totally check out, all of this stuff can be done in the moment as you're noticing yourself getting in that space in order to bring you back down and stay present, right? To be mindful of what you're doing and saying. So the first thing is that you could use your sight, right? A lot of people don't realize this. But if you open your eyes just a little wider, it has the effect of bringing you closer into a room. So if you're ever getting overwhelmed, a really easy go-to, if we're going to talk about mindful grounding, is to use your vision. Pick anything in the room. It could be the color black, let's say. It might be wood. It might be metal, right? And I just want you to open your eyes a little bit wider and scan. And you can even do it right now. Look around the room and pick a color. And just slowly scan around to see where that color exists in your environment and try to only focus for just a moment on the colors that you're supposed to be noticing in the environment with your eyes just slightly wider. This would be an example of using your vision to ground yourself, to be mindful, bringing you into the here and now, looking around with your vision and focusing on the colors, right? If you then notice your body, what you'll probably notice is that you're a little bit more calm, probably not 100%, right? Something's still going down, but also you're much more in what's going on here and now so that maybe you can talk and get some thoughts together. Let's move on. Let's just move down your face to the other senses, right? So the next sense is going to be your hearing. I like music. And so for me, mindfulness and music, they go hand in hand. There's a ton of different ways that you can actually use listening and sound in order to engage yourself. The first thing is that you can always listen to music. That's the obvious first thing for mindfulness, right? You need to practice 20 minutes of mindfulness. You can try to practice 20 minutes of mindfulness to a playlist. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't have to be a meditation class. What would need to be true, though, is when you're engaging with your music, you have to pick how you're going to engage in it so that you're present. Maybe you're going to take some part of the song that you don't normally listen to and just start to notice all the different parts, right? Because in each song, there's layers, there's instruments, there's production, there's ad libs. Those are things that you can focus on mindfully instead of just letting that verse go by and barely even noticing, how did I get to the chorus? I must have been singing and not even paying attention. That's not mindful listening, right? Mindful listening is either making sure you're singing every single word along with that song so that you're really engaged in the lyrics, right? Or listening to parts you've never really listened to before. Those are ways of engaging. You can even look up lyrics and read along to songs while you're listening to the lyrics. If we're talking about music, just to stay in the same family, the other thing that we might be able to do is mindful movement, which simply means, can I feel in my body what this music does to me? Right? And I know for a lot of us, we can. And this is not even something we think of as mindfulness, but when we feel it in our body and something's kind of happening there, what we want to be able to do is go, this is actually me being present. If I rehearse this, there's going to be a benefit outside of me just dancing around my room, right? And that's going to be that I'm going to be able to focus a little bit better on it, on other things, because I'm here practicing moving my body and being present. Instead of moving my body and then starting to think about how I look, or instead of moving my body and then starting to think about my insecurities about different things, move my body and my mind starts drifting to what I should be doing. Mindfulness requires us to say, engage in this movement and focus on this movement and this music and where your body wants to go next. Focus on following the feeling. The way you can use sound, right, is really similar to the way that you can use your voice, because your voice is a sound, right? Your voice also echoes inside of you and vibrates inside of your body. So something that I sometimes do is I'll try to notice where feelings exist inside of my body and see if I can actually vibrate, focus enough on the feeling inside of my stomach or my chest, and figure out what would be the noise that I could make to move this vibration up and down this discomfort that I'm starting to feel, right? Could I be present enough with what's going on inside of me to actually kind of give myself an internal massage with my voice? Because if I go down here, it doesn't resonate in the same place that it does if I go, that vibrates up here, right? And I want to be mindful with the use of my voice. And when we're singing, taking breaths and expelling those breaths and really being mindful about the way we are singing is also a choice around mindfulness. If we want to do something a little bit more fun, we can also use taste. Anything you eat, anytime you eat, can be an opportunity for you to be mindful. In fact, there's a classic mindfulness activity that has to do with just putting a raisin in your mouth, noticing all the different textures, sensations, and slowly really appreciating the experience of what it's like to have this wrinkly little raisin in your mouth. And not just noticing in theory that you know it's a raisin, but starting to notice in your mouth, what does it actually feel like to eat a raisin? And maybe you have a favorite dessert or a favorite meal of the day or coffee in the morning. And all of those are opportunities to notice the taste of things, the temperature of things, what it's actually like, sensation by sensation, to consume something, right? And even when you have something like an eating disorder, this is something they have you actively engage in, mindful eating, right? Because the experience of eating when your head is somewhere else is not even the same practice as eating when you actually are paying attention, right? That's getting rehearsal and being present here and now and noticing what your body wants and likes and doesn't like. And now mindfulness doesn't mean that you're always going to feel good during it. That's kind of an illusion, right? What it means is you will feel present with what your body's feeling right here, right now. And also start to notice, will that be able to pass if I don't intervene with this feeling at all? The answer is almost always yes. There is meaning to your feelings and functions to your feelings, but you don't have to do and grab onto something every single time that you have a thought. That's why mindfulness also becomes really important for us, because most of us get seduced by the idea that if I have a worry, if I have a thought, I need to urgently address it and go into the plan and go into the thought loop right now. The truth is, it's usually not that urgent. We could probably take a break, come back later when we feel better, make better choices, and feel more rejuvenated if we just had moments in between that felt mindful. So the last thing is obviously your sense of touch, right? And so scent is easy. A lot of people like to carry scents, essential oils, things like that with them to ground them. A common soothing scent is peppermint, right? Gingerbread tends to soothe people. Food scents tends to soothe people. What you should know about smell before we get to touch is that it is the strongest sense of memory that you have. So if there is something you positively associate with a smell, grounding yourself or trying to bring yourself into the present moment by using smell so that you feel better and more comfortable is actually a really easy go-to. Let's say my grandma's house always smells like Bengay, right? It might seem unpleasant to other people, but when I go to my grandmother's house, I feel safe and I feel comfortable. Maybe the scent of Bengay is something I need to keep on hand to ground myself back into the present when my mind is getting away from the situation. That's how we can use our scent in the moment, right? We can also just notice if we smell anything. And mindfulness is all about just noticing without doing or engaging necessarily with the noticing. And so, lastly, outside of just your smell and your sight and your taste and your sound, you can use touch. Touch does not have to be something where other people are involved. So if you're thinking like, I don't want nobody else involved in my mindfulness, I'm trying to be calm and somebody else is touching me, it doesn't have to be like that, but it can be, which means that we can kind of explore when we're talking about 20 minutes a day. People have mindful sex, for example. You can Google that if you want to, but it is exactly what it sounds like, engaging in sex while focusing on the sensations here and now and trying to be very present with yourself about what feels good, what feels better, what feels worse, what's uncomfortable, what makes you feel more comfortable, so that you can kind of have this very present experience of pleasure without the sort of worries and discomfort that can often be a part of the experience of sex. And not just sex, foreplay, and all the lead up to sex. That's something that a lot of us don't engage in. And if we want to move just a little bit further down the spectrum with a partner or with another person, the idea of non sensual touching works exactly the same way. You can try to give somebody a massage, you can give somebody, a simple sort of tapping or scratch their back, right? And just make sure that in the moment you're noticing what feels good, what doesn't, what do I like, what do I notice, where do I notice it. These words about sensation, some of us will just go, it feels good, it feels bad. But you know how many ways something can feel on your skin and to your body inside and out? We're talking temperature and weight and movement and irritation and comfort and softness or hardness and some sort of stuckness sometimes, right? So sensation can be a really deep experience, but no matter what we're doing with our sensation, while it might be washing our hands with cool water or splashing water on our face, maybe it's simply sitting in a space that's warm and noticing what we're sitting on. But when we're doing that, we're being present with the sensations that are happening from the outside of our body to the inside of our body. What's happening for me internally, because your emotions and your feelings actually have a literal feeling in your body. What's happening as I'm sitting here? And what's happening on the outside that I can sense? Am I warm? Am I cold? Am I comfortable? Am I uncomfortable? And trying to get some sense of mindfulness around what it even physically feels like to be inside of your body, doing an activity, being touched, being alone, right? Some people will carry rocks with them. And so if you have a spiritual belief around cleansing or spiritual protection having to do with crystals, a wonderful way to combine this is using the grounding of a crystal, for example, holding it in your hands and making sure that you notice the temperature, the weight, the texture, the size, the shape, all of that within your grasp and on your palm. And this part of your hand where your fingertips and your fingerprints are significantly more sensitive, right, than this other side and most of your skin. So if you really want to get down to sensing and touching, this is a great place to start. So last but not least, right, for those of us who are artists, outside of just the five senses, you can also create mindfully. Mindful writing is something that a lot of us probably engage in without thinking about it very much. It almost feels like a vomiting of emotion and just kind of getting it right out there while you're writing and not thinking about much else, right? So what we're doing is separating out the type of art creation, which involves creating art, but not focusing on the here and now. Maybe focusing on the outcome. Maybe focusing on if it's good, if people will like it, if it's meeting your creative vision and your standard for good enough. That is not mindful creation. That might be creating art. You might be therapeutically coming up with something that's going to help you figure something out or comment on something in your life. It might help you process that piece of art, but it's not necessarily mindful just because you create it. Mindfulness, and this is very helpful for writers, this is very helpful for anybody who's physically creating something from their brain to a page or to a reality. It's that we need to experience what we're experiencing here and now, and then release that in a creative modality, right? So we're going to use painting or drawing or singing or writing or rapping, and we're not going to pause for self-evaluation. What we're going to do is we're going to really make sure, and excuse the sirens in my New York neighborhood, I'll be mindful of that while also being mindful of the fact that I'm here talking to you guys. What you really want to make sure is that when you're a creative, that you give yourself time to create outside of just the pressure of your job, right? And so if you're going to use mindfulness, and you are a creative for work, try to separate out the type of creation that you do when it's for somebody else versus this more mindful type of creation, which is maybe more rooted in you exploring you trying new things, being present with the process, enjoying creating and possibility, right? Because mindfulness is really existing in a place where we're trying to engage in activities from a really comfortable place, where even if we have an emotion, we're able to sit through it and continue on with the activity and be present in that more than we're present in our mind. So if just doing the activity is going to make you self-conscious, it's probably not a good candidate for mindfulness, at least not for 20 minutes of mindfulness. So what I suggest for everybody and for anybody who's interested in starting to rehearse mindfulness is A, don't hold yourself to a standard of 20 minutes a day right away. Any change takes time. Try your best if you struggle with being present, right, which most anxious people do, to just notice how you're feeling first. Be mindful of what is actually happening in your body. If there's something that you can do right now, starting today, it's to start to notice instead of just what you're thinking, what your body is actually doing in response to situations. Because that information is something that a lot of us don't even download, right? I'm yelling, I might be screaming, I might be defensive, I might be arguing my point. What I'm not noticing is how upset I am, how much my heart is racing, how much my stomach is uncomfortable. I might not even notice that I didn't eat today. And what mindfulness does for us is it gives us a moment to reconnect with what's going on, both inside of us and right here, right now. So maybe we can make some choices around how it is we really want to make our body show up and if we want to change our environment. If we practice it enough, though, which is why meditation is such a big part of practices in Buddhism, the idea is that we don't keep practicing it. It becomes the way that we actually engage with the world. And so having some sort of routine around being mindful becomes really important in terms of just making sure there's balance. There's plenty of things that are going to knock you off your game and make you focus on the negative, make you focus on the things that make you stressed, anxious, uncomfortable, that make it hard to survive, that make you want to be violent. The natural inclination for any mind is going to be to focus on the things that make it hard for me to survive and that make me unhappy and distressed. So unless we counter that experience with some experience of actively engaging in something that really keeps us grounded in what's going on right here, right now, our mind can and will wander to the places where we're worried and stressed and feel like there's something that we need to protect ourselves from. Instead of being able to balance that sometimes I can take a break or engage in my beautiful, present, safe relationships with people and not need to be doing all this other stuff that comes to my mind right this second. The other thing that it's going to help you do is that when you do have an emotion, it will oftentimes be less extreme, right? So the two things that we were talking about, right? In the moment, mindfulness helps you stay grounded. In the long term, it helps it so that all of your reactions are more grounded in here and now and presence. It sounds like such an easy thing to do, but I'll tell you a little bit about my own journey. I thought I was totally on it, but it turns out that what I was really on top of was what everybody else thought about me. That I was not actually being mindful about how I felt, what I needed, what I even would ask for if somebody asked me what I needed, right? And so I didn't have any idea what that sounded like. And I also didn't know what I would look like, what the version of me would be in the world if I was able to let go of some of that insecurity and worry. I didn't know who that person was. If I ever found her, I just accidentally happened upon her. We don't want that to be the life that we are sentenced to. We deserve to live as full, authentic, whole people. And in engaging in some sort of practice that's contemplative, something that makes you sit and engage here and now and be present, whether it's processing something difficult or doing something creative does not matter. Whether it's eating food or it's praying, that's not a big deal. They do studies and they find out that meditation is as helpful as prayer, which is as helpful as conscious processing and reflection, right? And so what we want to make sure is that we're not judging ourselves for how we do this, but we are making sure that somewhere in our lives, there are options to practice mindfulness. Do yourself a favor, because I do this with plenty of people that I work with, and try to sort of brainstorm different ways that you wouldn't mind being present right here, right now, while engaging in an activity. Maybe you like breathing activities and visualizations and meditations. Great. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're the type of person who wants to paint mindfully. Maybe you want to dance mindfully or sing mindfully or do anything with your hands, tactile on top of it, right? Maybe I want to create something or fix a car mindfully. Whatever it is, it doesn't really matter. The skill is for you to be able to be more regulated and more present with you. So, those are all the goodies for now, right? It's not the easiest thing to get done, but I encourage you not to turn mindfulness into another place to criticize yourself and beat yourself up. You are not doing it wrong. It takes a while for our bodies to learn to get away attention to all the things that scare us and worry and make us frustrated and feel like we need to fight, and to take a second and regroup and resettle. We have to give ourselves permission for that, and we have to give ourselves rehearsal for that, right? It's like when you first leave the house and your parents are all freaked out. In time, they learn, right? You'll be okay, even if they're not constantly over you, but it takes sitting with it and rehearsing it and learning that over and over again through experience. And for those of us who have been through a lot of really rough things, understand that your anxiety probably keeps you safe. When you shut down or when you don't feel or when you're not paying attention and you're all busy, that probably keeps you pretty safe when you're feeling overwhelmed. That being said, your whole life does not need to feel overwhelming. So if you get a quiet, clean space to yourself, start to think about how to reconnect with your body, with your community, with other people, so you can experience some safety, some passion, some joy, some possibilities, and get back into this place where you can be present and start making some conscious, intentional choices about yourself and your life. So, as always, promise we're going to end with a tarot pull. I have been getting the same card lately, so if I get that card, I'm going to pull 2 cards just for the heck of it, so we can have a kind of more wide experience of what lessons there are here. So, the card I'm pulling today is the High Priestess card. The High Priestess card calls us to be reminded that we have access to our full selves even when it feels far away. There is always a higher self, a higher intuition, right? And one of the things, especially in mindfulness, right, is that it's actually asking you to let go of the fear that if you don't automatically go into your defenses, that you'll still be okay. That you can prove to yourself that your intuition is enough, that your higher self is enough to protect yourself, and that you've learned the lessons now and can embody them without having to actively fight and defend yourself, right? So when we're looking at the High Priestess, I'm just going to go to my little guidebook for the biggest takeaway. It's trusting your intuition, letting it steer you, being guided by realms beyond the conscious world. And so this is what we're talking about. This practice is actually guided in spirituality. This is not something totally separate from the idea of there being a connectedness, a version of you that is a spiritual you, that is a higher self, right? And so we go back to our High Priestess, and that if you really go to that place where you are present with yourself, where you take away the defenses, and this is the last message of the card, that you can gain sacred knowledge and wisdom through esoteric and mystical practices, right? So mystical practices would include things like tarot, right? But mindfulness, being present, gives us insight into things that we can't quite gain when we're worked up, defensive, and feeling scared. So remember to honor the High Priestess in you. Develop a ritual around your mindfulness that feels good for you. Try to give yourself options of different types of mindfulness, active and low energy. And that way you'll really be empowered to try this out whenever and however you can. I challenge people to try to start with at least 1 minute of something mindful and see how it is for you. If you can't do anything else, what you can do is go right on YouTube, right, and look for conscious breathing bells. And what you'll find is you'll find a guided track that has a little line that goes up and down that you can follow with your eyes, and a bell that goes on and off so you can follow it with your breath. And that's just something to start seeing. If even for a minute, if I sit with my breath, how can I do with being here and now? Is it difficult for me, or is it something that I really enjoy? And for those people who sometimes can check out totally of their body, here is the red flag. Here is the big warning at the end of this. Your higher self does not exist when you shut down. So if you're sitting in a meditation class totally checked out and in a whole nother world, and then at the end of it, you find yourself feeling worse, and this happens, people, try to notice that maybe what's actually happening is you're not being present here and now. You're starting to dissociate or check out from your body, because when you start to feel your feelings, it actually kind of freaks you out. And some of us have the experience that feeling our feelings can be dangerous. So if I just let my body feel what it feels and I calm down, that leaves me on off guard and I might get hurt. I might be taken advantage of. Something bad might happen. As I'm saying that, that might be a part of your story. And so know that if that is part of your story, that feeling your feelings, just that can be dangerous for you. That starting with quiet, silent meditation may be actually a really harmful thing for you to do, which will leave you feeling overwhelmed and flooded. Because what you're going to do is you're going to check out, you're going to come back, all those feelings will come flooding right back in, and you're going to feel worse. There are better ways for you to practice mindfulness, and you can choose any one of your 5 senses to do that. Just make sure that you're not going for an experience where actually what's happening is you're tuning out, or you're shutting down or powering down a little bit and just not feeling at all. Some of us have that reaction. A lot of us have it, especially if we're sexual assault survivors and things like that, that can happen. For most people, meditation is fine. For some of us, it's not as easy because our bodies have been sites where we're not really sure if we can trust being relaxed or calm or off guard. And if that is your case, this is just the red flag. Meditation might actually make you check out of your body if you start feeling too much. So try to start with something a little high energy, something that you can engage with mindfully like that. That way you're not triggering yourself and accidentally going into a place where you're thinking, oh, it worked so well while I was doing it, and then after it was done, I feel bad. That just means I was tuning out while I was doing it, and then I got flooded because then I stopped checking out of my body and all the stuff came back in, right? So we're going to go for something more like movement, more like touch, more like being engaged in sort of mindful, present things where you're noticing what feels good and better and worse, instead of totally checking out in this quiet, silent meditation room and then really triggering our trauma. All right, you guys. So that is it for today. I will see you at the same place at the same time next week on People Always Ask. Please stay in touch with your high priestess, with your higher self. You have everything you need to protect yourself. Have a wonderful week, and I will see you soon.